I stood in the middle of Romano's Italian restaurant as my sister Amanda declared loudly for everyone to hear that I was no longer family because I refused to pay her husband Derek's gambling debts. The entire extended family applauded her announcement during what was supposed to be our father's birthday celebration. I felt humiliated and betrayed as relatives I had helped for years turned against me. 1 hour later, when the bill arrived, Amanda's credit card got declined. All eyes turned to me expectantly, but instead of saving them, I simply stood up and walked toward the exit. Let me explain how I got to that moment of public humiliation. My name is Clark, and for the past 8 years, I have been my family's financial safety net. After dropping out of college to care for my sick mother, I built a successful landscaping business from nothing more than determination and a borrowed pickup truck. While my friends were earning degrees, I was learning the hard way how to run equipment, manage crews, and satisfy demanding clients who expected perfection from their outdoor spaces. My business, Green Valley Landscaping, started with basic lawn maintenance, but grew into comprehensive landscape design and installation. I specialized in drought-resistant gardens and sustainable irrigation systems, which became increasingly popular in our part of California. By age 28, I employed 12 full-time workers and had contracts with 3 major housing developments. Success came through 16-hour workdays, calloused hands, and an unwavering commitment to quality that earned me referrals from satisfied customers. But success also made me the family's go-to person for financial emergencies. When Amanda wanted her dream wedding at the Ocean View Country Club, I wrote a check for $15,000 without hesitation. When my cousin Jessica needed money for nursing school after her parents lost their jobs, I covered her tuition for 3 semesters. Uncle Frank's cancer treatment required experimental therapy, not covered by insurance, so I paid the medical bills totaling $23,000. When Dad's auto repair shop struggled during the economic downturn, I quietly transferred money into his business account to keep the doors open and his employees paid. Each time I told myself this was what family did for each other. Mom had always taught us that blood was thicker than water, and helping family was not just an obligation, but a privilege. She died believing our family would always support each other through thick and thin. I honored her memory by living that principle, never expecting anything in return, except the knowledge that my loved ones were safe and secure. 3 months ago, everything changed when I discovered Derek owed $47,000 to various creditors. Amanda came to my house on a Tuesday evening, tears streaming down her face, explaining that Derek had developed a serious gambling problem. She said he started with small bets on basketball games, but escalated to high-stakes poker and online sports betting. The debt included credit cards maxed out for cash advances, personal loans from multiple banks, and money borrowed from friends who were now demanding repayment. Amanda begged me to help, claiming Derek would lose his job at First National Bank if anyone discovered his financial troubles. She painted a picture of Derek as a good man who made mistakes but deserved a second chance. According to Amanda, Derek was ashamed and willing to do whatever it took to make things right. She assured me this was just a temporary setback and that Derek had learned his lesson about gambling. I offered to pay for professional gambling addiction treatment instead of simply covering the debts. There were excellent programs at facilities like Pine Grove Recovery Center, where Derek could get the help he truly needed. I explained that just paying off gambling debts without addressing the underlying addiction would likely lead to more gambling and larger debts down the road. Treatment was the responsible approach that would actually solve the problem rather than enabling it to continue. Derek reacted with explosive anger when Amanda presented my offer. He stormed into my office the next day, red-faced and shouting that he did not need therapy or counseling. Derek insisted he just needed one substantial loan to get even with his creditors, and then he would never gamble again. He claimed his gambling was under control and that his recent losses were just bad luck that would eventually turn around. Derek demanded I trust him as family and stop treating him like a child who needed supervision. When I held firm on my position about treatment, Derek accused me of being controlling and self-righteous. He said I was using my money to manipulate the family and make everyone dependent on my approval. Derek claimed I enjoyed being seen as the family savior and that I was prolonging his crisis because it made me feel important. His words stung because they twisted my genuine desire to help into something selfish and manipulative. The situation escalated when other family members began taking sides. Dad stopped returning my phone calls after Derek convinced him that I was being unreasonably stubborn. Jessica started making passive-aggressive comments about how some people forget where they came from once they become successful. Uncle Frank suggested I was judging Derek too harshly and should remember that everyone deserves forgiveness and second chances. Amanda launched a systematic campaign to portray me as selfish and uncaring. She told relatives that I was hoarding money while Derek suffered from stress and anxiety about his debts. She shared selective details about my business success, emphasizing my profits while downplaying the risks and hard work involved. Amanda painted Derek as a victim of circumstances beyond his control, and me as someone who could easily solve the problem, but chose not to out of spite. The pressure intensified when Amanda announced she was pregnant. She claimed the stress of Derek's financial troubles was affecting her health and potentially harming the baby. Family members began calling me directly pleading with me to help for the sake of my future nephew or niece. They argued that innocent children should not suffer because of adult disagreements, and that I had a moral obligation to protect my family's next generation. Tonight's dinner at Romano's was supposed to celebrate Dad's 62nd birthday, but I suspected it was actually an ambush. The invitation came from Amanda, who insisted we needed to gather as a family and work through our differences. She said Dad really wanted all his children and grandchildren together for his special day, and it would mean everything to him if we could put our disagreements aside for one evening. I arrived at Romano's at 7 o'clock, sharp, hoping we could actually enjoy a peaceful family meal. The restaurant buzzed with the typical dinner rush, energy families and couples enjoying their evening meals under warm lighting and the gentle hum of conversation. Our large table in the center dining room accommodated 12 family members with Dad at the head, wearing his favorite blue sweater and a genuine smile that reminded me why I loved family gatherings. But as the evening progressed, I noticed the coordinated way family members kept steering conversation toward financial responsibility and family loyalty. Tommy shared a story about helping his neighbor through a difficult time, emphasizing how good it felt to be generous when someone really needed help. Jessica mentioned how grateful she still was for educational support she had received, and how it changed her entire life trajectory. The comments felt rehearsed and pointed, each one designed to remind me of my capacity to help and the positive impact my generosity had made in the past. Dad nodded approvingly at each story, occasionally glancing at me with an expression that seemed to say he hoped I was listening and learning from these examples of proper family behavior. Amanda sat directly across from me, occasionally touching her still flat belly and talking about her hopes and dreams for the future. She mentioned wanting to provide a stable home for her child and how important it was for children to grow up feeling secure and loved. Derek remained unusually quiet during most of these conversations, though I noticed him checking his phone frequently and occasionally stepping outside to take calls he described as work-related emergencies. The carefully orchestrated nature of the evening became clear when Amanda stood up during dessert, tapped her wine glass with a knife, and asked for everyone's attention. She thanked Dad for being such a wonderful father and grandfather, and expressed gratitude for having such a close and supportive family. Then she turned to me with the expression of disappointment and sadness that seemed genuine enough to convince anyone who had not witnessed the preceding months of manipulation. Amanda's voice carried across the restaurant, as she announced that some people seem to forget that family comes before money. She said it broke her heart to see someone choose greed over compassion, especially when a pregnant woman and her unborn child were involved in the situation. Amanda declared that she could no longer consider someone family if they valued money more than the welfare of their own relatives. The words hit me like a physical blow as Amanda looked directly at me and stated that I was no longer part of this family because I refused to help Derek in his time of need. She said my selfishness had shown my true character and that she could not allow such negative influences around her future children. Amanda concluded by saying the family would be better off without someone who pretended to care, but only helped when it was convenient or made him look good. The applause started with Tommy and spread around the table like wildfire. Cousin Jessica clapped enthusiastically while nodding her agreement with Amanda's assessment. Uncle Frank joined in while shaking his head sadly, as if witnessing a tragic fall from grace. Even Dad remained silent, neither applauding nor defending me, which felt like the deepest betrayal of all. As I sat there processing this public humiliation, I noticed Derek nervously checking his phone again and whispering urgently to Amanda. Through fragments of his hushed conversation, I caught references to Monday deadlines and people who were getting impatient about payments. Something about Derek's demeanor suggested the situation was far more complicated and dangerous than anyone had revealed to me. Throughout the dinner, Derek's behavior became increasingly erratic and desperate. While Amanda delivered her carefully crafted speeches about family loyalty, Derek ordered bottle after bottle of expensive wine as if celebrating some victory that had not yet occurred. He made grandiose toasts about the importance of family bonds and how real relatives always supported each other through difficult times. Each toast seemed designed to reinforce the guilt-inducing narrative Amanda was weaving, but Derek's nervous energy suggested he was barely maintaining control of his emotions. Between courses, Derek stepped outside multiple times for what he claimed were urgent business calls from bank clients. However, his conversations were anything but professional. Through the restaurant's large windows, I could see him pacing frantically while shouting into his phone, occasionally punching the air in frustration and checking his watch obsessively. These were not the calm, measured discussions of a banking professional, but the desperate negotiations of someone facing imminent consequences. During one of Derek's absences, I overheard fragments of conversation between other family members that revealed shocking truths about their financial situations. Jessica quietly confessed to Tommy that she had not actually attended nursing school in 4 months because she could no longer afford the tuition payments. She had been working 3 part-time jobs at a coffee shop, retail store, and cleaning service to pay back money she had borrowed specifically to lend to Derek, thinking it was a short-term loan that would be repaid quickly. Uncle Frank whispered to Dad about how he had taken out a second mortgage on his house to help Derek, believing the money would be returned within 60 days. Frank explained that Derek had provided detailed documentation about a guaranteed investment opportunity that would double the money, allowing Derek to pay his debts and provide Frank with substantial returns. Instead, Derek had apparently gambled away Frank's money within 2 weeks, leaving Frank facing foreclosure on the house where he had lived for 37 years. Most shocking was learning that Dad's auto repair shop was only 3 weeks away from permanent closure. Dad had given Derek complete access to the business checking account after Derek claimed he could invest the shop's profits in high-yield certificates of deposit through his banking connections. Instead, Derek had systematically drained the account to fund his gambling addiction, leaving Dad unable to pay suppliers, employees, or rent on the commercial property that housed his lifelong business. Amanda herself had not paid her mortgage in 4 months, living in a constant state of panic about losing the house she and Derek had purchased just 2 years earlier. She had borrowed against her retirement account, maxed out multiple credit cards, and even sold her grandmother's jewelry collection to provide Derek with gambling money. Despite these desperate measures, their financial situation continued deteriorating because Derek's gambling had become completely compulsive and uncontrolled. The manipulation network extended beyond immediate family members. Tommy admitted to Jessica that he had been providing Derek with detailed information about my business contracts, client payments, and equipment purchases. Derek had specifically requested this intelligence gathering, claiming he needed to understand my financial capacity to determine how much help I could realistically provide. Tommy thought he was helping facilitate a family reconciliation, not realizing he was participating in an elaborate scheme to extract money from me. During Derek's next phone call outside, I received an urgent text message from Luis, my business partner and foreman. He warned me that Derek had been calling our clients directly, telling them that I was experiencing serious financial difficulties and might not be able to complete their landscaping projects on schedule. 3 major contracts worth over $60,000 were now in jeopardy because clients were concerned about my company's stability and considering hiring alternative contractors to avoid potential problems. This revelation was particularly devastating because my business reputation was built on reliability and trustworthiness. Clients hired Green Valley Landscaping because they knew I would deliver exactly what I promised on time and within budget. Derek's interference was not just about money, but was actively sabotaging the professional relationships I had spent years building through consistent performance and integrity. When Derek returned from his latest phone call, his face was pale and sweaty despite the cool evening air. He immediately ordered another bottle of wine and began drinking more heavily than before, his hands shaking slightly as he poured. Derek's conversation became increasingly loud and inappropriate, making other restaurant patrons glance over at our table with expressions of concern and annoyance. Through Derek's increasingly careless phone conversations, I began piecing together the true scope of his gambling debts. The $47,000 Amanda had originally mentioned was apparently just the tip of the iceberg. Derek owed money to multiple bookmakers, online gambling sites, and what sounded like less legitimate lending sources that charged extremely high interest rates and employed aggressive collection methods. One particular phone call revealed that Derek actually owed $138,000 to various creditors, including several organizations that were not traditional banks or credit companies. Derek's side of the conversation included references to extending deadlines, negotiating payment plans, and pleading for more time to secure funds from family sources. The desperation in his voice suggested these were not patient, understanding creditors, but people who expected immediate payment and had unpleasant consequences for those who failed to deliver. The most disturbing revelation came when Derek stepped into the restaurant's bathroom, and I overheard him on a call with someone he addressed as Mr. Castellano. Derek was explaining that he had a family member with substantial assets who would definitely cover the debt by Monday morning. He provided specific details about my business, including the estimated value of my equipment property and client contracts. Derek assured this Mr. Castellano that the money was essentially guaranteed because family pressure would force me to pay rather than see my relatives face serious consequences. As Derek concluded this call, he mentioned that tonight's dinner was specifically designed to secure my commitment to paying the debt. He sounded confident that the combination of public pressure, family guilt, and concern for Amanda's pregnancy would leave me no choice but to provide the necessary funds. Derek even laughed while describing how he had orchestrated the entire evening to manipulate my emotions and force my cooperation. When Derek returned to the table, I noticed Amanda watching him with an expression that wasn't love or partnership, but fear. Her occasional touches to her belly seemed less like protective maternal gestures and more like nervous habits of someone under tremendous stress. When Derek leaned over to whisper in her ear, Amanda flinched slightly and nodded quickly, as if agreeing to instructions rather than receiving affectionate comments. The most shocking revelation occurred when Amanda excused herself to use the restroom, and I followed to check on her well-being. In the hallway outside the bathrooms, Amanda broke down completely, and admitted that the pregnancy announcement from last month had been Derek's idea, not a genuine medical condition. She explained that Derek had convinced her to fake the pregnancy as emotional leverage to force my cooperation, arguing that family members always rallied around expectant mothers and unborn children. Amanda showed me the fake pregnancy padding she had been wearing under her loose-fitting dress, explaining that Derek had purchased it online and insisted she wear it to family gatherings to maintain the deception. She was terrified about what would happen when people expected to see a growing belly and eventually demanded to meet a non-existent baby. Derek had assured her they would figure out a solution to that problem after they secured the money to pay his debts. Through her tears, Amanda revealed that Derek had been emotionally and financially abusing her for months. He controlled all their bank accounts, monitored her spending, and threatened to leave her penniless and homeless if she refused to help him manipulate our family. Derek had convinced Amanda that his gambling debts were somehow her fault for not being supportive enough of his investment strategies, and that she owed him complete loyalty and assistance in securing funds from any available source. Amanda also confessed that Derek had been giving her pills to help her stay calm during stressful family interactions. She showed me a small bottle of pills Derek claimed were herbal supplements for anxiety, but the labeling looked suspicious and unprofessional. Amanda said the pills made her feel disconnected and compliant, which Derek claimed was necessary to help her handle the pressure of their financial situation without breaking down in front of family members. The final piece of Derek's elaborate deception became clear when Amanda admitted that Derek knew the owner of Romano's restaurant and had specifically chosen this location for tonight's confrontation. Derek had arranged for our large table in the center of the dining room to ensure maximum visibility for what he expected would be my public capitulation to family pressure. He had even instructed the restaurant staff to make the evening memorable and provide excellent service, because he anticipated celebrating a major financial breakthrough. Most disturbing was Amanda's revelation that Derek had invited a reporter from the local newspaper to be present at the restaurant tonight. Derek expected that after I agreed to pay his debts, the family would have a touching reconciliation that would make a heartwarming human interest story about the power of family love and forgiveness. The reporter was supposed to witness and document Derek's redemption and our family's triumph over adversity through unity and sacrifice. Instead, Derek's carefully orchestrated plan was about to collapse spectacularly, and I was finally beginning to understand the full extent of his desperation and manipulation. Using my phone discreetly under the table, I began researching Derek's claims about his employment and financial situation. A quick search of the First National Bank employee directory revealed that Derek's name had been removed from their staff listings. Further investigation through professional networking sites showed that Derek's employment status had changed to seeking new opportunities approximately 2 months ago, contradicting his claims about still working at the bank and needing to protect his professional reputation. This discovery led me to investigate deeper into Derek's recent activities. Public records searches revealed that Derek had been terminated from First National Bank for suspicious activity involving customer accounts. According to news reports, I found the bank had discovered unauthorized access to client financial information and irregular transactions that triggered an internal investigation. Derek had been fired and was potentially facing criminal charges related to financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. The devastating truth about our family's financial collapse began emerging through additional research and overheard conversations. Dad's auto repair shop had failed not because of general economic conditions, but because Derek had systematically stolen money from the business account over a period of 6 months. Derek had convinced Dad that he could invest the shop's profits in high-yield bank products, but instead had gambled away everything, leaving Dad unable to pay his employees' suppliers or commercial rent. Jessica was not actually attending nursing school, as everyone believed. Financial aid records showed she had been forced to withdraw after Derek failed to repay money she had borrowed specifically to lend to him. Jessica had been working multiple low-wage jobs to service the debt she incurred, helping Derek while maintaining the pretense of being a student to avoid family shame and disappointment. Her educational dreams were completely derailed by Derek's manipulation and lies. Uncle Frank's situation was even more heartbreaking. He had mortgaged his paid-off house to provide Derek with investment capital, believing Derek's promises about guaranteed returns through insider banking knowledge. Frank was now facing foreclosure on the home where he had lived for decades and raised his children, all because he trusted Derek's fraudulent investment scheme. At 72 years old, Frank was too old to recover financially from this devastating loss. Through Derek's increasingly careless phone conversations, I learned that his gambling debts extended far beyond traditional bookmakers and online betting sites. Derek owed substantial amounts to organizations that operated outside legal gambling frameworks, including loan sharks who charged exorbitant interest rates and employed intimidation tactics to ensure repayment. These were not patient creditors who would accept payment plans or negotiate reasonable terms, but dangerous people who expected full payment immediately and had serious consequences for those who failed to deliver. Derek's desperation became more apparent as I listened to his phone calls with various creditors throughout the evening. He was frantically trying to negotiate extensions and payment deferrals, but his requests were being denied because he had already broken multiple previous promises. Some creditors were demanding immediate payment of principal plus accumulated interest and penalties, which had increased the total debt far beyond the original borrowed amounts. The most alarming revelation came when I overheard Derek's conversation with someone he called Mr. Torino, who was apparently the most dangerous of his creditors. Derek was pleading for additional time while assuring this person that he had secured a family member with substantial assets who would definitely cover the entire debt. Derek provided specific details about my business, including my equipment value property assets and annual revenue, essentially using my success as collateral for his gambling debts without my knowledge or permission. Even more disturbing was Derek's claim that I had already verbally agreed to pay the debt, which was completely false. Derek told Mr. Torino that tonight's dinner was just a formality to finalize the payment arrangements and that the money would be available by Monday morning. Derek had used my name and reputation to buy himself more time, meaning these dangerous creditors now expected payment based on promises I never made. When Derek returned from this particularly intense phone call, I noticed his hands were trembling and his shirt was soaked with perspiration, despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. Derek immediately ordered another bottle of expensive wine and began drinking more rapidly, as if trying to numb himself against the overwhelming pressure he was facing. His behavior was becoming increasingly erratic and desperate, making other diners glance over at our table with concern and disapproval. Amanda's growing fear became more evident as Derek's desperation intensified. When he whispered instructions to her, she nodded quickly and fearfully, like someone who had learned that disagreeing with Derek led to unpleasant consequences. Amanda's occasional touches to her fake pregnancy padding seemed more like nervous self-soothing than maternal protection, and her eyes darted anxiously between Derek and other family members, as if gauging everyone's mood and potential reactions. The restaurant setup became more suspicious as the evening progressed. I noticed that our table location provided maximum visibility to other diners, and that several staff members seemed unusually attentive to our conversation. When I stepped outside briefly for fresh air, I overheard a busboy telling a co-worker that someone had specifically requested detailed service for our table because it was supposed to be a special family celebration that might be covered by local media. This revelation confirmed Amanda's earlier admission that Derek had orchestrated the entire evening for maximum dramatic impact. Derek had chosen Romano's not for its food or ambiance, but because it provided the perfect stage for his manipulation performance. The central table location, attentive service, and media presence were all designed to pressure me into compliance through public embarrassment and social obligation. The fake pregnancy deception became even more elaborate when I observed Amanda's careful movements throughout the evening. She consistently positioned herself to hide the artificial padding while making exaggerated protective gestures that seemed performative rather than instinctive. Amanda's pregnancy announcements to various family members lacked the joy and excitement typical of expectant mothers, instead carrying an undertone of desperation and fear. During dessert, Derek stepped outside for another frantic phone call, and I seized the opportunity to research the suspicious pills Amanda had shown me earlier. Using prescription drug identification websites, I discovered that the pills Derek claimed were herbal anxiety supplements were actually prescription sedatives typically used for severe psychiatric conditions. These medications required doctor supervision and could cause dependency, cognitive impairment, and dangerous interactions with alcohol. This discovery revealed another layer of Derek's abuse and manipulation. He had been drugging Amanda to keep her compliant and cooperative, while he executed his elaborate scheme to extract money from our family. The pills explained Amanda's unusual passivity and her willingness to participate in obviously unethical deceptions, like faking pregnancy and publicly humiliating me at a family gathering. When Derek returned from his latest phone call, his face was ashen, and his movements were shaky and uncoordinated. He had apparently received news that made his situation even more desperate, because he immediately began drinking heavily and making increasingly inappropriate comments about family loyalty and financial obligations. Derek's behavior was drawing negative attention from other restaurant patrons and creating an uncomfortable atmosphere for everyone at our table. The most shocking revelation occurred when I overheard Derek's whispered conversation with the local newspaper reporter who had been dining alone at a nearby table. Derek was explaining that the story had changed from a family reconciliation to something potentially more dramatic and newsworthy. Instead of documenting my generous support for family members in crisis, the reporter might witness a family being torn apart by greed and selfishness, which could make an even more compelling human interest piece. Derek actually seemed pleased about this alternative narrative, suggesting that negative publicity about my refusal to help family might pressure me into compliance after the fact. He mentioned that business owners were particularly vulnerable to bad publicity, and that community shame might accomplish what family guilt had failed to achieve. Derek was so desperate that he was willing to destroy my reputation and business relationships to force my cooperation with his scheme. As the evening reached its climax, I realized that Derek had systematically lied to everyone about everything. His employment status, debt amounts, gambling addiction, severity, family financial situations, and even his relationship with Amanda were all based on deception and manipulation. Derek had created an elaborate web of lies that had trapped our entire family in financial and emotional crisis, while he pursued his gambling addiction without any regard for the consequences to others. The most devastating realization was that Derek had already told his most dangerous creditors that I would pay his debts using my name and business reputation as collateral without my permission. If I refused to pay, these criminals would assume I was breaking a promise I never made, potentially putting my business and personal safety at risk. Derek's manipulation had extended beyond emotional blackmail to potentially criminal fraud and extortion. As the evening wound down, the waiter approached our table with a leather folder containing the bill for our elaborate dinner celebration. Derek had orchestrated the entire meal with expensive appetizers, premium wine selections, and multiple dessert courses, confident that I would pay as I always had in the past. The total came to $847, a significant amount that reflected Derek's assumption about my continued willingness to cover family expenses, regardless of the circumstances. Derek made a show of reaching for his wallet while simultaneously pushing the bill toward Amanda, as if they were going through the motions of attempting to pay before inevitably turning to me for rescue. Amanda fumbled through her purse with exaggerated concern, pulling out her credit card, while expressing hope that their account had sufficient funds to cover such a large expense. Their performance was clearly rehearsed, designed to create the impression that they were trying to be responsible before reluctantly accepting my financial assistance. When Amanda handed her credit card to the waiter, Derek continued making conversation about the lovely evening and how wonderful it was to have family together for Dad's special birthday celebration. He thanked everyone for coming and mentioned how these gatherings were so important for maintaining family bonds and creating lasting memories. Derek's cheerful demeanor contrasted sharply with the underlying tension and desperation I had observed throughout the evening. 5 minutes later, the waiter returned with an apologetic expression and quietly informed Amanda that her credit card had been declined due to insufficient funds. Amanda feigned surprise and embarrassment, claiming she thought Derek had made a large deposit earlier that week to cover their monthly expenses. She made a show of checking her phone for banking notifications while expressing confusion about their account balance and wondering if there might be a mistake with the credit card processing system. Derek immediately offered his own credit card as an alternative, maintaining the pretense that they were capable of handling their financial obligations without assistance. However, when the waiter returned several minutes later, Derek's card was also declined, this time due to the account being over its credit limit. Derek expressed shock and frustration, claiming there must be some error because he had specifically arranged for additional credit capacity to cover unexpected expenses. At this point, Dad attempted to contribute by offering his own payment method, but his credit card was also declined due to the account being maxed out from previous financial emergencies related to Derek's schemes. Uncle Frank searched through his wallet, apologetically explaining that he had limited cash available because most of his money was tied up in investments and monthly expenses. Jessica and Tommy both acknowledged they were living paycheck to paycheck and could not contribute to such a large restaurant bill. The situation became increasingly awkward as our family's financial limitations became apparent to other restaurant patrons who could not help but observe our payment difficulties. The waiter remained professional but clearly needed resolution of the billing situation so he could attend to other tables and complete his evening responsibilities. Other family members began shifting uncomfortably in their seats as the realization set in that none of them could actually afford the expensive meal Derek had ordered for everyone. Every family member gradually turned their attention toward me with expectant expressions, assuming I would step in to resolve the payment crisis, as I had countless times before. Tommy made a lighthearted comment about me always being the family's financial hero who saved the day when unexpected expenses arose. Jessica mentioned how grateful everyone was to have such a successful and generous relative who could handle situations like this without any personal hardship or sacrifice. Even the waiter began looking in my direction expectantly, apparently having been informed by Derek that I would ultimately be responsible for settling the bill. Derek had clearly anticipated this exact scenario and prepared everyone to expect my intervention when other payment methods failed. The entire evening's events seemed designed to create this moment of maximum pressure and social obligation. Derek's nervous energy intensified as he realized his carefully orchestrated plan was not proceeding as expected. He began making more direct appeals for my assistance, mentioning how family members always helped each other during temporary financial difficulties and how these situations were opportunities to demonstrate love and commitment to family relationships. Derek suggested that successful family members had moral obligations to help less fortunate relatives, especially during special occasions like birthday celebrations. Amanda joined Derek's appeal by referencing her pregnancy and the stress that financial uncertainty was causing during what should be a joyful time in her life. She mentioned concerns about the baby's health and development if she continued experiencing anxiety about money and family conflicts. Amanda suggested that resolving the immediate payment issue would allow everyone to focus on more positive topics, like planning for the baby's arrival and strengthening family relationships for the next generation. Dad remained conspicuously silent during these appeals, neither supporting nor opposing the family's expectations that I would pay the bill. His silence felt like a betrayal, because it suggested passive acceptance of the manipulation and emotional blackmail being directed toward me. Dad's lack of intervention or defense made the situation feel like a coordinated family ambush designed to force my compliance through social pressure and guilt. The restaurant atmosphere became increasingly tense as other diners began noticing our table's payment difficulties and extended discussion about financial responsibilities. The waiter made several polite attempts to expedite the billing resolution, clearly needing to clear our table for other customers and complete his evening tasks. Other staff members occasionally glanced over at our situation with expressions of concern and impatience. Derek's desperation became more apparent as he realized his manipulation tactics were not achieving their intended results. He began making veiled threats about the consequences of family members abandoning each other during crisis situations. Derek mentioned how disappointed and hurt certain people would be if family loyalty was not demonstrated when it mattered most. His comments carried undertones of potential retaliation or punishment for those who failed to meet family expectations and obligations. As the tension escalated, I had a moment of complete clarity about the pattern of enabling behavior that had defined my relationship with my family for years. Every time I rescued them from financial difficulties, I prevented them from learning to solve their own problems and face the natural consequences of their decisions. My generosity had created a system of dependency and entitlement, where family members made irresponsible choices, knowing I would ultimately pay for their mistakes. Amanda made one final emotional appeal, crying about the potential loss of her home, her fears about raising a child in poverty, and her desperate need for family support during the most vulnerable time in her life. She begged me to remember our childhood bond and all the happy memories we shared growing up together. Amanda pleaded with me to consider what our deceased mother would want me to do in this situation, and how disappointed Mom would be to see our family torn apart by financial disagreements. Derek became increasingly agitated as his manipulation tactics failed to achieve the desired response. He stood up abruptly and began speaking loudly enough for other restaurant patrons to hear, accusing me of selfishness and cruelty toward my pregnant sister and elderly father. Derek claimed that my refusal to help demonstrated a complete lack of character and family values, suggesting that financial success had corrupted my moral compass and made me forget my obligations to those who had supported me throughout my life. In that moment, I made the decision that would change everything. I calmly informed the table that I would not be paying for their expensive dinner or Derek's gambling debts. Instead, I offered one final alternative. I would gladly pay for Derek's admission to a professional gambling addiction treatment program and help family members create realistic payment plans with their creditors. But I would not simply hand over money that would likely be gambled away within days or weeks. Derek's reaction was explosive and immediate. In his rage, he accidentally revealed that he had been recording our entire conversation on his smartphone, which he had positioned strategically on the table throughout the evening. Derek had planned to use my words as evidence in a potential lawsuit, claiming that I had verbally agreed to pay his debts and was now breaching an oral contract. The entire evening had been designed not just for emotional manipulation, but for legal extortion, with Derek intending to sue me for breach of promise if family pressure failed to secure my cooperation. This revelation shocked everyone at the table, including family members who had not known about Derek's recording scheme or his plans for potential legal action against me. The discovery that Derek had been secretly documenting our private family conversation for possible use in litigation demonstrated a level of premeditation and manipulation that went far beyond desperate gambling addiction into calculated fraud and extortion. I stood up slowly and deliberately, my chair scraping against the restaurant floor, with a sound that seemed to echo through the sudden silence at our table. Every family member stared at me, with expressions ranging from shock to desperation, clearly not expecting this response to their coordinated manipulation attempt. Derek's face had gone pale as he realized his secretly recorded evidence would not support the lawsuit he had planned, since I had never actually agreed to pay his debts. Speaking in a calm but firm voice that carried across the restaurant, I addressed not just my family, but the other diners who had been unwittingly drawn into this dramatic confrontation. I explained that real love sometimes requires saying no to destructive behavior, even when that decision causes temporary pain and disappointment. Enabling someone's gambling addiction by paying their debts without requiring treatment is not kindness, but participation in their continued self-destruction. I told the assembled crowd about the 8 years I had spent supporting this family through various financial crises, always believing that my generosity was helping them build better lives and stronger futures. Instead, my well-intentioned assistance had created a cycle of dependency where family members made increasingly irresponsible decisions, knowing I would ultimately bear the financial consequences of their poor choices and reckless behavior. Derek's recording scheme became the perfect example of how far the manipulation had progressed beyond simple requests for help into elaborate fraud and potential criminal extortion. I explained to everyone present that Derek had planned to use secretly recorded conversations as evidence in a lawsuit designed to force payment of gambling debts through false claims about verbal agreements and family contracts that never actually existed. The revelation about Amanda's fake pregnancy created audible gasps from nearby tables as I gently but clearly explained how Derek had convinced my sister to wear artificial padding and lie about expecting a child in order to manipulate my emotions and force my financial cooperation. Amanda's shame was evident as she could not deny the accusation, instead looking down at the table, while other family members stared at her in shock and disbelief. I described Derek's systematic theft from Dad's auto repair shop, his lies about employment status, and his deception regarding the true amount of his gambling debts, which totaled over $130,000, rather than the $47,000 originally claimed. Family members began realizing the extent to which Derek had manipulated and lied to all of them, not just to me. Speaking directly to the newspaper reporter Derek had invited to document what he expected would be my capitulation. I explained that this story was actually about the dangers of enabling addiction and the importance of establishing healthy boundaries in family relationships. I agreed to provide a detailed interview about financial abuse within families and the psychological tactics used by addicted individuals to manipulate their relatives into funding destructive behavior. Dad finally broke his silence to apologize for his passive acceptance of the family's manipulation campaign against me. He admitted knowing about some of Derek's lies, but feeling powerless to intervene because he feared losing his relationship with Amanda and his future grandchild. Dad expressed regret for prioritizing family harmony over honesty and accountability, acknowledging that his silence had enabled Derek's escalating manipulation and abuse. Jessica tearfully confessed that Derek had threatened to destroy her credit rating and prevent her from returning to nursing school if she did not participate in gathering information about my business and personal finances. She revealed that Derek had promised to pay her student loans if I agreed to cover his gambling debts, creating a pyramid scheme where everyone's financial recovery depended on my compliance with his demands. Uncle Frank admitted that Derek had been systematically borrowing money from him for months, always promising quick repayment through guaranteed investment opportunities that never materialized. Frank realized he had lost his life savings and family home because he trusted Derek's lies about banking expertise and insider investment knowledge that was completely fabricated. Tommy acknowledged his role in providing Derek with detailed information about my business operations and client contracts, initially believing he was helping facilitate family reconciliation, but actually participating in intelligence gathering for Derek's manipulation campaign. The guilt and shame on Tommy's face showed he finally understood how his actions had contributed to the family's betrayal of my trust and generosity. Before leaving, I clearly stated my new boundaries and conditions for any future family relationships. I would gladly help family members who genuinely wanted to improve their lives through education treatment or legitimate business planning, but I would never again enable addiction or pay for the consequences of irresponsible financial decisions. Family members who wanted my support would need to demonstrate commitment to positive change through their actions, not just their promises. I left my business card on the table and told them they could contact me when they were ready for real help, rather than just money. I emphasized that genuine assistance meant supporting their efforts to solve problems, not solving problems for them while they continued making the same mistakes repeatedly. Recovery from addiction and financial irresponsibility required personal accountability and sustained effort, not just an injection of cash to postpone consequences. Derek became increasingly unhinged as he realized his elaborate scheme was collapsing completely. He began threatening to sue me for abandonment defamation and breach of family obligations, while simultaneously trying to convince other family members that I was the real villain in this situation. Derek's desperation made him alternate between rage and pleading, creating a disturbing display that demonstrated the full extent of his emotional instability and manipulation tactics. Restaurant security approached our table as Derek's behavior became disruptive to other diners and potentially threatening to staff and customers. Derek was shouting about family betrayal and financial revenge, while making wild gestures that knocked over wine glasses and disturbed nearby tables. The professional calm of the restaurant environment had been completely destroyed by Derek's inability to accept that his manipulation campaign had failed. As I walked toward the exit, Amanda suddenly collapsed and began convulsing, creating immediate medical emergency that required paramedic response. The pills Derek had been giving her to keep her compliant during family gatherings were actually powerful prescription sedatives that could cause dangerous reactions, especially when combined with alcohol. Amanda's medical crisis provided dramatic evidence of Derek's willingness to drug and abuse family members to maintain control over his schemes. Derek's panicked reaction to Amanda's collapse revealed his knowledge that the pills he had provided were dangerous and potentially illegal. His immediate attempt to dispose of the pill bottle and deny any involvement in Amanda's condition demonstrated consciousness of guilt and potential criminal liability for drugging someone without their informed consent or medical supervision. The newspaper reporter's story would now focus on domestic abuse, addiction, manipulation, and the criminal behavior of someone who was willing to drug family members and commit fraud to fund his gambling addiction. Instead of the family reconciliation story, Derek had planned the media coverage would expose his systematic abuse and manipulation of relatives who trusted and loved him. Paramedics arrived within minutes of Amanda's collapse, their professional assessment quickly determining that she had been consuming prescription medications not prescribed to her. The lead paramedic, an experienced woman named Sarah, immediately recognized the symptoms of sedative overdose combined with alcohol consumption, a potentially lethal combination that required immediate medical intervention and hospitalization for monitoring and treatment. Derek's panicked attempts to distance himself from Amanda's medical emergency only increased suspicion about his involvement in her condition. When paramedics asked about her recent medication history, Derek claimed complete ignorance while simultaneously trying to retrieve the pill bottle he had given Amanda earlier in the evening. His contradictory behavior and obvious knowledge of the medications made it clear that he was directly responsible for Amanda's dangerous medical condition. Police arrived as part of the standard response to suspected drug-related medical emergencies, and Derek immediately became a person of interest in a potential poisoning investigation. Detective Martinez questioned Derek about his relationship with Amanda, his knowledge of her medication use, and his access to prescription drugs that were clearly not prescribed to him or Amanda, by any legitimate medical professional. Amanda, once the sedatives were counteracted, and she regained full consciousness, began revealing the extent of Derek's emotional and financial abuse for the first time. Without the chemical influence that had kept her compliant and confused, Amanda clearly described months of manipulation, threats, and coercion that Derek had used to control her behavior and force her participation in his schemes against our family. The fake pregnancy deception became evidence of Derek's willingness to exploit intimate relationships and family emotions for financial gain. Amanda explained how Derek had purchased the artificial pregnancy padding online and forced her to wear it during family gatherings, threatening to abandon her and destroy her credit rating if she refused to participate in his manipulation campaign. Police discovered that Derek faced potential charges not only for drugging Amanda without consent, but also for fraud related to his use of my name and business reputation as collateral with dangerous creditors. Derek had essentially forged verbal agreements and made promises on my behalf that could have resulted in serious threats to my personal safety and business operations. With Derek in police custody and Amanda receiving proper medical care, our family finally had the opportunity to assess the true extent of the financial and emotional damage his addiction had caused. Dad's auto repair shop could potentially be saved through proper debt restructuring and business planning, but only if we acted quickly to negotiate with creditors and suppliers before permanent closure became inevitable. Jessica learned that she could return to nursing school through legitimate financial aid programs and student loan options that did not depend on family loans or Derek's fraudulent promises. Her academic record was still strong, and several nursing programs had flexible schedules for students who needed to work while completing their education. Uncle Frank's situation was more complicated because he had already lost significant equity in his family home, but financial counselors could help him explore options for preventing complete foreclosure and preserving some of his retirement security. The key was acting immediately before the foreclosure process progressed beyond the point of negotiation and compromise. Luis called to report that our business clients had been contacted by police as part of the investigation into Derek's harassment and false claims about my company's financial stability. Once clients understood that Derek's calls were part of a criminal scheme, they actually expressed increased confidence in my integrity and professionalism. Several clients offered additional work projects because they were impressed by how I had handled the family crisis with honesty and ethical boundaries. The newspaper reporter's investigation revealed that Derek's gambling addiction and manipulation tactics followed patterns common to serious gambling disorders, where addicted individuals systematically exploit family relationships and social connections to fund their compulsive behavior. The article would help other families recognize similar warning signs and seek appropriate help before their situations reached crisis levels. Derek's former employer, First National Bank, confirmed that he had been terminated for unauthorized access to customer accounts and suspicious financial transactions that violated federal banking regulations. Derek faced potential federal charges related to his banking misconduct, in addition to the state charges related to fraud, drug-related offenses, and domestic abuse allegations. 3 weeks later, police arrested several of Derek's creditors who were operating illegal gambling and loan shark businesses that charged extortionate interest rates and used threatening collection tactics. Derek's cooperation with authorities, motivated by his desire to reduce his own criminal penalties, helped police shut down criminal organizations that had been victimizing vulnerable people throughout our community. Amanda filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order against Derek, finally free from his manipulation and abuse after months of psychological and chemical control. She began attending support groups for families affected by gambling addiction and slowly rebuilt her emotional and financial independence with help from legitimate counseling services and social support programs. Dad's auto repair shop reopened under a new business plan that included proper financial controls and realistic profit expectations. Dad hired a professional bookkeeper and established banking relationships that prevented any single individual from gaining unauthorized access to business funds. His reputation in the community was actually enhanced by his honesty about the financial difficulties and his commitment to operating ethically going forward. The loan sharks who had threatened our family were arrested and prosecuted for extortion and illegal lending practices, removing the immediate physical danger that Derek's debts had created. Police investigations revealed that Derek was just one of many victims who had been exploited by these criminal organizations that specifically targeted people with gambling addictions and financial desperation. 6 months later, Derek accepted a plea agreement that included prison time, mandatory addiction treatment, and restitution payments to family members and other victims of his schemes. His cooperation with law enforcement investigations helped prosecute the criminal organizations he had been involved with, potentially reducing his sentence, but ensuring that his gambling addiction and manipulation tactics would be closely monitored for years to come. 1 year later, I can honestly say that walking out of Romano's restaurant that night was the most difficult but necessary decision I had ever made regarding my family relationships. The immediate aftermath was painful and chaotic, but it ultimately freed everyone from the destructive cycle of enabling and manipulation that had dominated our family dynamics for years. Derek is currently serving a 3-year sentence in state prison and attending mandatory gambling addiction treatment as part of his plea agreement. His letters from prison initially continued the same manipulation tactics he had used for years, alternately apologizing and blaming others for his situation, while requesting money for commissary purchases and legal fees. Our family learned to recognize these continued manipulation attempts and stopped responding to his demands for attention and financial support. Amanda's recovery has been remarkable to witness. Free from Derek's psychological and chemical manipulation, she has rebuilt her life with genuine strength and independence. She completed a dental hygienist certification program and now works at a pediatric dental practice where her natural compassion and patience make her excellent with children and anxious patients. Amanda is genuinely pregnant now, expecting a daughter with Michael, a respiratory therapist she met during her recovery support group meetings. The relationship between Amanda and me has become stronger than it ever was before, because it is now based on honesty, mutual respect, and healthy boundaries, rather than financial dependency and emotional manipulation. Amanda named me as her daughter's godfather, and I am honored to be part of raising a child in an environment of truth and accountability, rather than enabling and deception. Dad's auto repair shop is not just surviving, but thriving under proper management and realistic business practices. Dad hired Jenny, a certified public accountant who specializes in small business financial planning, to handle all bookkeeping and banking relationships. The shop now operates with transparent financial controls that prevent unauthorized access while maintaining the personal touch and quality service that made Dad successful for decades. Dad and I rebuilt our relationship through honest conversations about the years of enabling behavior and financial rescues that had prevented him from developing sustainable business practices. He expressed genuine gratitude for my refusal to continue the cycle of dependency, acknowledging that my tough love ultimately saved his business and taught him valuable lessons about accountability and proper financial management. Jessica returned to nursing school through legitimate financial aid and scholarship programs, graduating with honors and accepting a position at the Regional Medical Center's emergency department. She loves the fast-paced environment and finds great satisfaction in providing care during medical crises. Jessica paid me back every dollar she had borrowed, even though I told her it was not necessary, because taking responsibility for her debts was important for her own sense of integrity and independence. Uncle Frank was able to keep his house through a mortgage modification program that reduced his payments to affordable levels while allowing him to rebuild his retirement savings slowly but steadily. Frank now volunteers with a non-profit organization that helps elderly people avoid financial scams and predatory lending schemes, using his painful experience with Derek's manipulation to help protect other vulnerable seniors from similar exploitation. My landscaping business expanded significantly because my reputation for integrity and ethical behavior attracted clients who valued trustworthiness and reliability. Several major commercial developments hired Green Valley Landscaping specifically because they learned about my principled stand during the family crisis and wanted to work with a contractor who demonstrated strong moral character under pressure. Luis and I opened a second office to handle increased demand from clients throughout the region. We now employ 22 full-time workers and have contracts with municipal governments, school districts, and healthcare facilities that require sustainable landscaping solutions. Our success stems from consistent quality work and honest business practices that clients can depend on completely. I became an advocate for families dealing with gambling addiction and financial abuse, speaking at community centers and working with financial counselors to help other families recognize manipulation patterns and establish healthy boundaries. Many people have shared stories remarkably similar to my own experience, confirming that Derek's tactics are common among individuals with serious gambling addictions. The support groups I facilitate focus on helping family members distinguish between genuine assistance and enabling behavior that perpetuates destructive patterns. We emphasize that real love sometimes requires refusing to rescue people from the natural consequences of their choices, allowing them to experience the discomfort necessary for genuine change and growth. Amanda attends these support group meetings, regularly sharing her story of recovery from both addiction-related abuse and the enabling behaviors that allowed Derek's manipulation to continue for so long. Her testimony helps other family members understand that victims of manipulation often participate unwillingly in schemes that harm their relatives, and that healing requires forgiveness for both the manipulator and those who were coerced into enabling destructive behavior. The newspaper article about our family's crisis became a widely shared piece that helped other communities recognize the warning signs of gambling addiction and financial abuse within families. The reporter James Chen won a state journalism award for his sensitive but thorough coverage of addiction-related family dysfunction and the importance of professional intervention rather than family-based enabling. Derek will face deportation proceedings after completing his prison sentence because his criminal convictions violated the terms of his permanent residency status. This consequence was not something our family sought, but it represents the natural result of choices Derek made repeatedly over several years while rejecting multiple opportunities for treatment and honest behavior change. The most important lesson I learned through this painful experience is that boundaries are not walls that separate people, but bridges that connect them in healthy, sustainable ways. When I stopped enabling my family's irresponsible behavior, I actually created opportunities for genuine relationships based on mutual respect and shared accountability, rather than financial dependency and emotional manipulation. True family love means supporting each other's growth and independence, not preventing people from experiencing the consequences that teach important life lessons. My refusal to pay Derek's gambling debts ultimately saved my family from years of additional abuse and manipulation, while forcing everyone to develop real problem-solving skills and emotional resilience. Amanda's daughter will grow up in a family environment characterized by honesty, accountability, and genuine support for healthy choices rather than enabling and excuse-making for destructive behavior. She will learn from an early age that love means expecting the best from people and helping them achieve their potential, not rescuing them from difficulties they need to overcome independently. The weekly family dinners we now enjoy are completely different from the tense, manipulative gatherings Derek orchestrated when he was controlling our family dynamics. We share both struggles and successes, honestly offering emotional support and practical advice while respecting each other's independence and decision-making autonomy. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members expected you to sacrifice your financial security to enable their poor choices? How do you think you would handle pressure from relatives who believe your success obligates you to rescue them from problems they created themselves? I would love to hear your thoughts about setting boundaries with family members who struggle with addiction or financial irresponsibility. Please like this story if it helped you think differently about family obligations and enabling behavior. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming manipulation and building healthy relationships. Share this with anyone who might be facing similar family pressure and comment below with your own experiences or questions about establishing boundaries with relatives who have unrealistic financial expectations. Thank you for listening to my story and allowing me to share this difficult but ultimately positive experience with you. Remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is refuse to enable their destructive choices, even when that decision causes temporary pain and conflict. Your boundaries protect not just your own well-being, but also create opportunities for others to develop the strength and skills they need for genuine recovery and independence. May you find the courage to make difficult but necessary decisions when family loyalty conflicts with enabling behavior, and may your relationships be built on mutual respect and healthy accountability rather than dependency and manipulation.